In the 3rd year since being marked by Chu Lin, an omega whose pheromones perfectly match his suddenly emerged. This individual is Chi Yang, a student from a disadvantaged background whom Chu Lin and I decided to jointly sponsor. With ailing mother, a gambling father, and a spirit both shattered and resilient, he elicits sympathy from all quarters. At a wedding anniversary party, after indulging excessively in alcohol, Chi Yang's pheromones inadvertently leaked. The usually composed Chu Lin, overwhelmed by the sweet fragrance of gardenias, found his eyes glistening with emotion. He instinctively released my hand. Senyueshi, I feel as if I'm losing my mind. That was the first time I witnessed him so profoundly affected by someone. In the dead of night, I fled, disappearing without a trace. Yet, Chu Lin searched for me with an intensity bordering on madness. 1. The compatibility of your pheromones is 0. The doctor awkwardly pushed the report across the table towards us, adding, such a situation is indeed quite rare, but do not despair. If you take good care of your health, there is still a chance for you to conceive. I nodded calmly, understood. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Chu Lin's profile. He remained silent, his expression grim, and a palpable tension seemed to envelop him. Perhaps out of a sense of dignity as an alpha, he held great concern over the prospect of having children, yet I remained indifferent. After all, our union was devoid of any emotional foundation. We each pursued our own careers, often engrossed in our busy work lives, sharing the same bed only on rare occasions. During the 3 days of each month when I was in heat, Chu Lin would invariably accompany me. My mischievous friends mockingly referred to us as 3-day spouses. The absence of children in our 3 years of marriage had left Chu Lin's family anxious, applying relentless pressure upon us. Thus, we reluctantly commenced preparations for conception. Today's visit to the hospital for a pheromone compatibility test was merely a part of this process. The compatibility between an alpha and an omega significantly influences the likelihood of conception. The higher the compatibility, the greater the chance for the omega to conceive. Even during my heat, Chu Lin and I would only engage once, keeping it brief. I had anticipated that our compatibility would not be particularly high, yet I was taken aback to discover it was, in fact, 0. This was indeed somewhat awkward. Upon exiting the consultation room, Chu Lin snatched the report from my hand and crumpled it into a ball, tossing it into the trash. What are you angry about? I found his reaction amusing. After all, you were coerced into marrying me from the start, so now you have the perfect excuse to divorce, don't you? Divorce? The very mention of the word seemed to strike a nerve in Chu Lin. He turned to me with a hostile glare and suddenly seized my wrist with a grip that was anything but gentle. Chu Lin let go. I struggled against him, but he effortlessly dragged me towards the parking lot. Chu Lin forcefully shoved me into the back seat, slammed the door shut, and bound my hands with his tie. My glasses were askew from the struggle, barely resting on the bridge of my nose, casting a blurred image of Chu Lin's face before me. Senyueshi, do you truly not care? I could not discern Chu Lin's expression clearly, yet I sensed he was looking down on me from a position of superiority. I furrowed my brow. What do you mean? Chu Lin grasped my chin and inquired again. Our compatibility is 0, and you are utterly indifferent? Should I care? You are merely my legal husband, I retorted with a sardonic smile. A friendly reminder, Mr. Chu, what you are about to do constitutes marital rape, and I could press charges against you. Chu Lin's voice suddenly turned icy. Then go ahead and report me. Consult your Su lawyer. Am I not doing you a favor by giving you an opportunity to see Su Sijuan every day? Shouldn't you be grateful? Before I could voice any further thoughts, Chu Lin removed my troublesome glasses and sealed my lips with his own. 2. My glasses were shattered, and a piece of my shirt had been torn. Fortunately, before departing, Chu Lin had tossed me a spare suit jacket. The faint scent of orchids lingered in the car, and I swallowed a dose of oral suppressants. As I awaited my body to return to calm, I dialed Su Sijuan. Su Sijuan, my childhood friend, is now a partner at a prestigious law firm in the country, renowned for his prowess as a litigation attorney. Seeking his assistance for a divorce seemed somewhat excessive. Are you certain? Su Sijuan asked incredulously just the other day. You mentioned wanting to make things work with Chu Lin. There is no making it work anymore. I rubbed the corner of my eye with my finger, gazing at the damp streaks on my hand. After Chu Lin's uncle passed away, we took over the sponsorship of a student he had been supporting. Isn't it a coincidence that this student happens to be an omega who is a perfect match for Chu Lin? There was a moment of silence on the other end before Su Sijuan asked, Do you not trust him? I smirked sarcastically. Does he trust me? Since Chu Lin did not believe that I could maintain a purely platonic friendship with another alpha, why should I trust that he could control his alpha instincts? I've tested the waters. Chu Lin does not want a divorce. Prepare the lawyer's letter for me directly. I ended the call, tidied myself up, and donned my spare contact lenses before stepping out of the car. I stood at the main entrance of Chu Lin's company. 20 minutes prior, as Chu Lin was preparing for a second encounter, his assistant had called, reporting an incident involving Chi-Yong. Chi-Yong had a father addicted to gambling who, upon learning that Chi-Yong was interning at Chu Lin's company, had come to cause trouble, demanding money. The staff, aware that Chi-Yong was a student we jointly sponsored, informed Chu Lin and awaited his arrival to handle the situation. Upon entering, I found Chu Lin seated on the sofa in the waiting area with Chi-Yong, intently examining the wound on his arm. A security guard was restraining a deranged middle-aged man, and a bloodied fruit knife lay discarded on the floor nearby. "Mr. Chu, it's just a small cut. It's nothing serious. After losing this much blood, how can you say it's nothing serious?" Chu Lin spoke to Chi-Yong, who had tears welling in his eyes as he cautiously tended to the wound. Having grown up with a silver spoon, this must have been the first time Chu Lin had cared for someone in such a manner. The assistant looked on, at a loss for words, until he turned and saw me approaching. He hurriedly asked, "Sin, how do you think we should handle Chi's father?" "Call the police," I replied without hesitation. "Gambling and intentional harm. He deserves to spend some time behind bars." "No." Hearing my words, Chi-Yong rushed over, clutching his wound, and pleaded with a pitiful expression. "Sin, my mother is ill and needs care, but I'm busy with school and work. I simply cannot manage. If my father is out of the picture." My mood soured, and I interrupted him before he could finish. "Do you seriously expect a knife-wielding gambler to care for anyone properly?" My stern tone startled Chi-Yong, and his eyes grew redder. "Enough." Chu Lin stepped in, pulling Chi-Yong behind him to mediate the situation. "Chi's home circumstances are difficult. He's not having an easy time. You should try to be a bit more understanding." As I fixed my gaze on his hand gripping Chi-Yang's arm, Chu Lin's voice trailed off, growing quieter. When he finally released his hold, he awkwardly averted his gaze from mine. "It is said that alphas and omegas with a perfect pheromone match are inevitably drawn to one another. I had never believed this before, but now I did. Although Chu Lin and I were merely a marriage of convenience, he had always projected an image of unity between us in front of others, feigning harmony. Now, he no longer even pretended. Chi-Yang's wound was not trivial. Chu Lin instructed his assistant to take him to the hospital, while Chi-Yang's father was taken away by the police. Chu Lin pulled me aside and, lowering his voice, questioned, "Didn't I tell you to wait for me in the car? You've made a mess of things by coming out. Your scent hasn't even dissipated yet. Do you have any idea how many alphas are in the company? Can you not exhibit a bit of omega awareness?" I feigned indifference, responding with a nonchalant "oh," and pushed his hand away, turning to leave. Chu Li was taken aback and quickly followed me. "Sun Yueshi, are you no longer going to argue with me?" His tone was somewhat urgent, tinged with a hint of helplessness. For 3 years of marriage, Chu Li and I have had our fair share of quarrels. The crux of our discord was simple. He did not believe that Su Sijuan and I had nothing between us. Our corporation collaborated with Su Sijuan's law firm, and he also served as our legal advisor, necessitating frequent communication. Thus, Chu Li regarded Su Sijuan as a thorn in his side. Believing I lacked the awareness of being an omega, I had explained this ad nauseum, weary of reiterating the same tiresome arguments. "I need to go home for a bit. I'm busy," I stated, sliding into the driver's seat and shutting the door, effectively barring Chu Li from entering. As I turned the key in the ignition, I returned to the Tsin family estate to visit my parents. They were equally astonished by the apparent incompatibility between Chu Li and me, exchanging glances after I recounted our situation. As a couple bound by an arranged marriage, we could not simply forgo having children. The Chu Li family was adamant about it, pressuring me to conceive. The exceedingly low chances of pregnancy implied a future fraught with hardship for me. My mother, visibly pained, embraced me with teary eyes. "All right, if you want to leave, then leave. I won't pressure you any longer." I turned to my father, who pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. "Initially, your mother and I thought highly of Chu Li, which is why we accepted the Chu Li family's proposal. If you are unhappy with him, then so be it. You have our blessing. The overseas division is in need of a leader, and your elder brother is stretched too thin. It would be good for you to take on that role. You are capable." I stayed for dinner, discussing future plans with my parents. By the time I returned to the villa, it was quite late. Upon entering, I was taken aback by the living room adorned with an array of flowers and balloons. Chu Li, with his shirt sleeves rolled up, was perched on a ladder, hanging balloons alongside the servants. "Is there a special occasion coming up?" I inquired. Chu Li glanced back at me, his eyes lighting up with an uncommon smile. Our wedding anniversary is in 3 days. Have you forgotten? 3 days? It seemed vaguely familiar. The butler had mentioned it in passing. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I pulled it out to check the message. My assistant had booked a flight to New York for me, scheduled for the evening of the 3rd day at 11 p.m. Chu Lin hopped down from the ladder. I've invited some friends over for a party, and the cake has been ordered. Why don't you check if you have friends to invite? You can even ask Su Sijuan to come. I don't mind. I regarded him with suspicion. Had Chu Lin lost his mind? Why this sudden magnanimity? Was this genuine or merely an act? As he approached, I quickly turned off my phone to avoid revealing the screen. Let me take a look, I replied dismissively. Chu Lin set aside his sleeves and pulled me down to sit by the sofa, where I noticed a plethora of bottles and jars arranged on the coffee table. I visited the hospital again and obtained some fertility medication, both for you and for myself, he said, displaying each item to me. I consulted the doctor. Even with a 0 compatibility rating, there are still chances for an omega to conceive. There have been cases in the past. I've instructed my secretary to adjust my work schedule, and I will try to return home earlier every evening to be with you. That's unnecessary, I interjected without hesitation, dousing his enthusiasm. Work comes first. It's not essential. I did not take the medication and ascended the stairs to my room. Chu Lin and I were both busy with work, often sleeping in separate rooms. I would only visit his room during my estrus period. However, upon entering my room, I found it eerily empty. All my personal belongings were gone. I turned to see Chu Lin standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking guilty. Where are my things? I asked. He sheepishly rubbed his nose with a finger. They've been moved to my room. It's not convenient for making a baby if we're sleeping in separate rooms, I replied, my irritation bubbling to the surface. Chu Lin should know I despise others meddling with my possessions, yet he did it anyway, even bringing in a collection of unknown medications. He was even trying to curry favor with me. How important was having a child to him? If he found me inadequate, couldn't he simply choose another omega? As my gaze swept over Chu Lin's face, a wave of nausea washed over me. Ugh! I clamped a hand over my mouth and rushed to the bathroom, emptying the contents of my stomach from dinner. Chu Lin appeared hurt, sitting in the living room with his back turned to the second-floor corridor, allowing me and the servants to return my belongings to my room. I did not take the medication, did not share a bed with him, and had little desire to engage with him. Chu Lin made no effort to approach me either. 3 days passed swiftly. The anniversary party was well attended, filled with Chu Lin's friends and executives from his company, while I had not invited anyone. Chu Lin was eager to play the role of a loving husband before others, and despite my cold demeanor, he took my hand, pulling me into laughter with his friends. I endured the charade with reluctance. Since that day I had vomited. I had been plagued by minor ailments, occasional chest tightness and headaches, perhaps a consequence of overexerting myself with the overseas division. TSK, 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 old Chu Lin showing off your affection. Huh? Since hand is so delightful to hold, you can't let go for even a second? One of Chu Lin's friends teased him with a nudge of his elbow. Enough of that. Go away, Chu Lin dismissed him. Once the crowd dispersed, I murmured, I need some fresh air. I attempted to pull my hand away, but he gripped it tighter. Frustrated, I pressed down my irritation and explained, Chu Lin, I'm not feeling well. Sin Yueshi. Stop making excuses. Chu Lin insisted, tightening his grip on my hand, scoffing, I'm merely holding your hand. Is it really necessary for you to be this repulsed? Chu Lin still harbored resentment over my earlier bout of vomiting. Noting my silence, he continued, I know you despise me and do not wish to have children with me. You look down on my parents and disdain interaction with my friends. How arrogant you are. You are the second son of the Tsin family. Even the titans of commerce must regard you with respect, and countless alphas pursue you. Yet we are still married. Can't you refrain from constantly opposing me? I caught a glimpse of the redness in the corners of Chu Lin's eyes, realizing his emotions were spiraling out of control. He had poor alcohol tolerance but had recklessly consumed too much. I did not look down on him. Rather, it was his persistent disbelief in me that created a rift. He could not fathom that I might actually care for him. The report stating 0 compatibility seemed to reinforce his belief that we were two souls destined never to unite. He had his grievances, yet I also harbored my own discontent, and I had no inclination to soothe him. Sunyueshi, Chu Lin grasped my shoulders, seemingly about to say more, but was interrupted by a cheerful voice from nearby. President Sin. Chang Yang approached us, a gift box the size of a palm cradled in his hands, jogging lightly. I was momentarily taken aback, unsure if I had misheard. Was he calling for me? As he drew nearer, I noticed Chu Lin's flushed face, clearly intoxicated, and I gasped, "Mr. Chu, you..." "There's nothing," Chu Lin waved dismissively. "Do you need something from him?" Chang Yang nodded, his bright, dark almond eyes fixed on me without blinking. "Mr. Tsin, thank you for helping my mother with her surgery fees and for finding a lawyer. I wish to express my gratitude, but I feared that what I purchased might not be to your liking, so I crafted a bracelet myself." He extended the gift box towards me, hope sparkling in his eyes. In his gaze, I glimpsed my own emotionless visage. This expression of mine often invites misunderstanding. I forced a stiff smile, my lips twitching. It was merely a small effort on my part. To me, the surgery fees for Chang Yang's mother were inconsequential, and assisting her in escaping from that gambling husband was merely a side note. As Chang Yang's benefactor and a fellow Omega, I was merely striving to help him navigate through his current predicament. For his future, Chu Lin would look after him. Seeing my willingness to accept the gift, a glimmer ignited in Chang Yang's eyes, his tone lightening. "Then, Mr. Tsin, may I help you put it on?" I hesitated, unaccustomed to being touched. But witnessing Chang Yang's eager anticipation, I was reluctant to dampen his spirits. Just as I was about to nod in agreement, Chu Lin abruptly snatched the gift from Chang Yang's hands. "I'll hold on to it for him." "Thank you," Chu Lin remarked, patting Chang Yang's head, his tone softening. "Why don't you go get something to eat? You're always so frugal, you've grown quite thin." The light in Chang Yang's eyes dimmed instantly. He glanced at me, then at Chu Lin, hesitated, and finally murmured, "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Chu," before turning to leave. "There's no need for that," I replied, a hint of irritation creeping into my voice. I had no intention of refusing. Was Chu Lin genuinely worried that Chang Yang's cold demeanor would upset me? He's just a child. I wouldn't hold it against him. Chu Lin paused, then murmured softly, "Is that so? Then you have quite a broad mind," he remarked, seemingly perplexed. I felt exasperated, wanting to shake him off. Yet he lingered like a shadow, following me closely. Unable to resist him, I acquiesced to his presence. As the party reached its conclusion, guests departed one by one, leaving the villa vacant once more. Chang Yang wished to stay and help the servants tidy up, but having drunk a bit, he staggered unsteadily. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know it was Su Sijuan messaging me. I had asked him to pick me up at 9 for the airport, and the time had come. Yet Chu Lin still clung to me, dazed. He leaned his forehead against my shoulder, gripping my hand tightly. "So sweet," Chu Lin mumbled. "Is that the scent of you, Sinueshi?" An alpha-S sense of smell is quite acute. It was only then that I noticed a faintly sweet fragrance wafting through the villa. The servants were all beta, and I was not the one leaking pheromones, so it must have been. I looked towards Chang Yang, who had somehow fallen asleep at the dining table, his ears flushed. Chang Yang, wake up," I called several times, but he remained unresponsive. I immediately instructed the servants to fetch suppressants. However, in that brief moment, the warmth enveloping my hand dissipated. Chu Lin, who had held on to me all night, finally let go. The fragrance of gardenia, belonging to Chang Yang, grew increasingly potent. My alpha, drawn by the sweet scent, turned his back to me and took slow steps towards him. "Sinueshi, I don't know what is happening," he murmured. "I feel like I'm going mad." "Chu Lin," I called out to him, my voice strained, yet I ultimately said nothing more. Stimulated by Chang Yang's pheromones, Chu Lin began to leak his own, his alpha instincts dominating his mind, rendering him oblivious to my words. My phone vibrated again. Su Sijuan was urging me. No longer hesitating, I turned to leave the villa. Su Sijuan drove me swiftly through the night. I deftly removed my SIM card and tossed it out the window. "Your assistant asked me to inform you that the marking removal surgery has been scheduled, but a comprehensive medical examination is required beforehand," Su Sijuan stated. "He has been rather anxious since you haven't replied to his messages. Is something wrong?" Chang Yang had experienced a severe pheromone leak, the scent even clinging to me. Su Sijuan must have sensed it. "It's merely an unrelated accident," I replied vaguely. An hour later, Su Sijuan's phone began to vibrate incessantly. He glanced at the caller ID and sighed in resignation. "Chu Lin is calling me." "It's fine, answer it," I said leisurely, polishing my glasses. After all, I'll have to deal with him later, since Su Sijuan was handling my divorce proceedings. He answered the call and switched it to speakerphone. "Su Sijuan, what does that lawyer's letter mean? Where have you taken Sinueshi?" Chu Lin's urgent voice crackled through the receiver, distorted slightly. Su Sijuan, usually of good temper, cooled his tone. "My client, Mr. Tsin, intends to divorce you. I haven't taken him anywhere. I'm merely acting as a friendly driver. Moreover, Mr. Tsin will not be attending court. I will represent him until the end. Chu Lin impatiently interrupted. Stop pretending, Su Sijuan. Do you think I'm unaware of your feelings for Tsun Yueshi? Mr. Su, your eagerness to help Tsun Yueshi with the lawsuit is merely a strategy to seize the opportunity once I divorce him. Su Sijuan scoffed lightly. Don't presume to judge my intentions. Chu Lin laughed coldly. Enough of this idle talk. Is Tsun Yueshi beside you? Let him take my call. Before Chu Lin could finish, Su Sijuan had already hung up. I cast him a grateful glance. Don't worry. I'll handle him for you, Su Sijuan reassured me. For some reason, this time, adjusting to the time difference proved exceptionally arduous. After arriving in New York, I managed to sleep for a while, but when I awoke, my head still felt heavy, and I couldn't help but feel nauseous. However, today marked my first day as the president of the Overseas Division. Meetings had been scheduled in advance, and I forced myself to endure the discomfort and attend. In the car, my assistant, Chang Zhen, expressed concern. Mr. Tsin, you don't seem well. Shouldn't we postpone the meeting? Through the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my pale visage. No, I declared firmly, the meeting will proceed as planned. Society harbors many prejudices against omegas. I refuse to succumb to such voices or to my alpha brother. I know I tend to be overly stubborn, but this is my way of survival. The lengthy meeting dragged on for 4 hours before concluding, and the remaining executives departed one by one. I shut my laptop, preparing to leave the company for a medical examination at the hospital. As I stepped out of the conference room, the tension that had been taut within me finally began to ease. I let out a gentle sigh, only for darkness to suddenly engulf me. Mr. Tsin, just before losing consciousness, I heard Chang Zhen's anxious voice, strained to the point of breaking. Time passed in an indeterminate haze, and I finally broke free from the depths of darkness. The air was tinged with a faint scent of antiseptic. Mr. Tsin, Chang Zhen's excited voice rang in my ears. You're finally awake. He grasped my icy hand. I slightly tilted my head and cast a glance at Chang Zhen, who promptly released his hand. I apologize, he murmured. Chang Zhen is a beta who has accompanied me ever since I began engaging with the affairs of the group, which amounts to nearly 5 years. I had a vague awareness of his feelings towards me, yet I regarded him merely as a familiar subordinate. I inquired in a hushed voice, how long have I been unconscious? Chang Zhen replied, for a day and a night. My brow furrowed involuntarily. What about the pre-surgery examination? The operation? As I was still legally married to Chu Lin, undergoing the marking removal procedure was not permissible. After deciding to go abroad, I had made considerable efforts to secure a surgery appointment at a private hospital. If I missed this opportunity, I would have to wait indefinitely. Consequently, during the estrus period a week later, I would have to rely on suppressants which could have significant repercussions on my health. Chang Zhen hesitantly responded, the surgery. It may no longer be feasible. Observing his evasive demeanor, I sensed that the situation might be more complicated than it appeared. How could it be impossible? Why? Chang Zhen parted his lips, struggling to articulate his thoughts, before finally managing to utter, I will fetch the doctor to explain. And with that, he dashed out of the room. While awaiting the doctor's arrival, I reached for my phone on the bedside table and discovered numerous messages from my mother sent during my unconscious state. Yueshi, it's alright. Mom will come to keep you company soon. If you're feeling unwell, please don't force yourself, alright? Rest well. What was happening? Did I receive a terminal diagnosis? I replied to assure her of my safety, and she responded swiftly, Yueshi, what are you planning to do about the child? Child? I stared intently at the screen, my brain, which had been dormant for an entire day, barely functioning. At that moment, the doctor entered, presenting me with a medical report. Mr. Tsin, an omega cannot undergo marking removal surgery during pregnancy, as it poses a life-threatening risk. Regrettably, your surgery must be postponed or cancelled. The report clearly stated, 13 weeks pregnant. I placed my trembling fingers against my abdomen, which still felt flat. Yet now I was being informed that I was with child. I had resolved to divorce Chu Lin, only to find myself pregnant with his offspring at this juncture. I vividly recalled the night 13 weeks prior. I had been preoccupied with work at the company, so much so that I forgot it was my birthday. Chu Lin had called numerous times, all of which I had missed. Frustrated, he had come to the office in the evening, barging into the meeting room and whisking me away before the eyes of my colleagues, lifting me in a princess carry and causing me great embarrassment. He placed me in the car, disregarding my protests, and kissed me fervently. In anger, I kicked him, demanding that he stop his antics. Whether from grievance or pain, his eyes glistened with tears. Tsun Yueshi, is it so difficult to answer my calls? I thought you had run away. I shot him a glance. If I were going to flee, I would have done so long ago. Why wait until now? Chu Lin held my waist, his gaze fixed upon me. Regardless, today I must tell you, he declared, no matter where you go, I will find you. Because you are my Omega, and can only be my Omega. At that moment, I had found him unhinged, a madman, yet I indulged him. We spent the night at a hotel, for the first time not stopping at the usual end. As dawn approached, Chu Lin bit down on my gland, his solid chest pressed against my back, his heartbeat resonating, urgent and powerful. In a haze of consciousness, I sensed something unspoken from him. Suddenly, Su Sijuan's call interrupted my thoughts. I snapped back to reality and answered. Yueshi, Chu Lin has refused to appear in court and has not hired a defense attorney. He is currently unreachable and missing from the company. Has he found you? My heart sank, and I immediately looked towards the door of the ward. The door remained firmly shut, the room devoid of any presence. I exhaled, my tense shoulders relaxing. No, Su Sijuan replied, that's good. If anything arises on your end, feel free to contact me. Understood. Chu Lin had gone missing without explanation. Given the severe pheromone leakage from that night's party, it was highly probable he had entered estrus early. Perhaps he was currently with someone else, too preoccupied to attend to anything else. It was improbable that anything had happened to him. Otherwise, the Chu family would surely have made a fuss. There was nothing to be overly concerned about. Pregnancy was merely a minor complication, one that could be resolved swiftly. There would be no mistakes. After ending the call with Su Sijuan, I summoned the doctor once more. The physician arrived with a document, inquiring, Mr. Tsin, have you made your decision? I nodded, yes. The compatibility of my pheromones with Chu Lin was nil. This child was a rare occurrence. Perhaps this would be the only child we would have in our lifetimes. I was well aware of this, yet I did not wish for it to impact my future. I lifted my gaze to the doctor. I have made my decision. Please terminate the pregnancy. I yearned to have the child removed swiftly and then proceed with the marking removal surgery, yet my wishes were unfulfilled. The doctor informed me that my body was too fatigued and weakened. I would need to rest for several days before the procedure could be performed. She left behind a consent form and a pen before departing. As I took the pen and began to sign, for some inexplicable reason, Chu Lin's voice echoed in my mind. No matter where you go, I will find you. My hand trembled, the sharp tip of the pen puncturing the paper, leaving behind an unsightly black ink blot. I could not suppress my agitation, returning the consent form to the bedside table. My pregnancy symptoms were particularly intense, yet I was fortunate that my mother had come to keep me company. She felt excessive guilt for having consented to my marriage with Chu Lin years ago, tending to me diligently every day. I longed to engage her in conversation, but the overwhelming drowsiness proved difficult to resist, leaving me sleeping for 12 hours a day without feeling refreshed. On the third day of my hospitalization, I dreamt of Chu Lin and awoke suddenly. Just as I was about to prop myself up to drink some water, I discovered my right hand was restrained, unable to move. Assuming my mother had fallen asleep beside me, I turned to look, only to find a man sprawled at the edge of my bed. He held my hand while sleeping. A surge of alarm coursed through me as I swiftly withdrew my hand, fumbled for my glasses, and switched on the bedside lamp. The outline of the uninvited guest became clear. It was Chu Lin. How had he found me? How had he gained entry? This was a VIP ward, in a dedicated building with security stationed downstairs. My mind was a whirlwind. Sun Yueshi. Chu Lin stirred awake at the sound of my movement, groggily calling my name. It was then that I took in his appearance. His disheveled black hair, stubble emerging on his chin, bloodshot eyes, and the suit he wore was the same one from the day I left, now tattered in several places. He looked utterly disheveled. How had he ended up like this? Had he climbed through the window? I glanced at the partially open window, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. This was madness. We were on the 5th floor. Fall could be fatal. What are you doing here? Su Sijuan should have made it abundantly clear that I intend to divorce you, and there is no room for negotiation. I lifted my chin, maintaining my customary assertiveness. Chu Lin's profound gaze bore into me. What's the reason? Because of Qi Yang? I shook my head, replying, because of you. The rift between Chu Lin and me had always existed. Qi Yang's emergence merely compelled me to confront that chasm. Chu Lin furrowed his brow, appearing somewhat perplexed. I let out a soft scoff. Are you wondering why, despite you and Qi Yang having done nothing inappropriate, I still insist on a divorce? I merely returned to you the distrust you held towards me. Do you understand now? A flicker of panic crossed Chu Lin's eyes. He parted his lips, feebly justifying himself. I don't distrust you. I didn't wish to linger on the matter any longer and issued an eviction notice. I've said enough. You may leave unless you want me to summon security. Chu Lin shook his head, half kneeling beside the hospital bed, grasping my hand once more. Sun Yueshi, let me explain. I don't truly suspect you of infidelity. I'm just so afraid. The howling night wind surged through the window, lifting the discarded surgical consent form from the bedside. The flimsy white paper fortuitously landed on Chu Lin's chest, interrupting his words. What is this? My heart raced. I rushed over to snatch it away. Seeing this, Chu Lin seized my wrist, raising an eyebrow. What could make you so anxious? It's not that Sun family's business secret, is it? He single-handedly unfolded the paper, scrutinizing the dense English letters, his expression shifting abruptly. Consent form for abortion? Chu Lin looked at me in disbelief, his deep brown pupils trembling. You're pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? He gripped my wrist tightly, causing me pain. I knew it all too well. Once Chu Lin learned of my pregnancy, progressing with the divorce would become considerably more challenging. Hence, I had enlisted the help of those in the know to keep it hidden. I lowered my gaze. I only found out after you left. That makes sense. Chu Lin's furrowed brow relaxed. You've been so busy these past few months. You hardly seemed aware of your pregnancy. To Chu Lin, the joy of having a child together overshadowed the shock of seeing the abortion consent form. He broke into a smile, the corners of his eyes betraying his delight. Sun Yueshi, how could someone as clever as you not realize you were pregnant? No, it's my foolishness. I should have had a checkup along with the pheromone test that day, otherwise I wouldn't have only found out now. Sun Yueshi, this is wonderful. We're having a baby. Chu Lin's joy overflowed, even moistening the corners of his eyes. Unable to contain himself, he leaned in to embrace me, but I raised my hand to block him. Chu Lin's expression darkened. Then he cautiously asked, May I touch it? I hesitated but ultimately nodded. After all, I intended to terminate the pregnancy, so why not grant Chu Lin a chance to bid farewell? Chu Lin sat on the edge of the bed, lifted the covers, and unfastened the lowest button of my hospital gown, raising the hem. His warm palm pressed against my abdomen, gently caressing. I wonder what gender our child will be, but surely they will be as beautiful as you. Chu Lin murmured, leaning down to place his ear against my belly. The fetus was only 3 months old, so of course he could hear nothing. Seizing the moment of his distraction, I quietly picked up my phone and sent a message to Changzhen. Notify security to come to my ward. Who are you messaging? Chu Lin's voice suddenly pierced the quiet room. I quickly turned off the screen, replying it's work-related. Chu Lin did not press further but lowered his gaze again to my abdomen, then tore the consent form in half. The shredded paper fluttered down like snowflakes. Tearing it one help, I said, this was already a voided document. A properly signed consent form has already been submitted to the doctor. Chu Lin's eyes reddened as he grasped my hand, pleading, Sun Yueshi, don't terminate it. It is our child. How can you unilaterally decide its fate? I replied calmly, it's in my womb, so naturally I have the final say. Chu Lin, why must you make such a fuss? Can't we part amicably? We are adults. Can't we handle this with dignity? Yet, Chu Lin remained steadfast. What do I need dignity for? I just want you, I want our child. Sun Yueshi, I don't think we've reached a point where divorce is necessary. Have you truly felt nothing for me these past 3 years? Do you really not care at all? I remained silent. The security guards were swift. They arrived on the 5th floor and burst into the ward, restraining Chu Lin. Sir, please do not disturb our esteemed guest's recovery. Chu Lin resisted, struggling fiercely, desperately trying to reach the bedside, insisting on finishing his words. If you truly didn't care, why did you cry in the car that day? Why was your first question upon seeing me about Qi Yang? You are not as magnanimous as you think. You are deeply bothered by Qi Yang's appearance. You are very concerned about the 0 on that test report. I maintained my silence, turning my face away from him. I feared looking into Chu Lin's anguished and furious eyes, for I knew that my long-held defenses would shatter entirely. I could not answer his questions, for he was not wrong. That day in the car, I had held back my tears, but ultimately, I had cried. Not due to Chu Lin's coercion, but because I realized that my relationship with him was irrevocably over. In this strained marriage that had endured for 3 years, neither of us was willing to yield. He was prickly and unapproachable, and I had erected high walls, refusing to open my heart. In the end, neither of us emerged unscathed. I was weary. I wanted to leave. But why wouldn't he let me go? Chu Lin's emotions had spiraled out of control. He continued to question me, his raised voice nearly tearing apart. You filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Yet when have you ever acknowledged your feelings? My hand, concealed beneath the covers, clenched the bedsheet tightly. The head of security warned Chu Lin, "Sir, if you do not leave, I will call the police." However, Chu Lin was beyond hearing. I did not wish for the situation to escalate to that extent and reluctantly spoke to temporarily soothe his emotions. "If you want to salvage our marriage, you may. But you must prove to me that you can overcome the instincts of an alpha. Otherwise, there's no discussion." Alphas are profoundly influenced by pheromones. Apart from those in the police and military who have undergone interference training, few can resist their instincts. Clearly, Chu Lin was incapable of such restraint. Otherwise, he would not have acted so unusually when Qi Yang's pheromones leaked that day. I intended to challenge Chu Lin, hoping he would willingly concede, so I deliberately made that statement. However, I never anticipated that those words would send the situation completely spiraling out of control. "All right, I agree." Chu Lin, fueled by an unknown strength, broke free from the grip of the two security guards and charged toward the bedside. I instinctively recoiled, but his target was not me. Instead, it was the pen that the doctor had forgotten on the bedside table. "Sun Yueshi, don't go back on your word," Chu Lin declared, swiftly removing the cap from the pen. He aimed the sharp tip at the side of his neck, and without hesitation, plunged it in. Bright red blood gushed forth, splattering onto my glasses. Within my field of vision, all was stained with blood. In the hospital room, a heavy silence enveloped the air. The security guards stood frozen in shock. Chu Lin knelt on the ground in agony, breathing heavily. In that instant, a chill coursed through my veins, and my fingertips trembled uncontrollably. "Chu Lin." I hurriedly pressed the nurse's bell and then rushed toward him, desperately applying pressure to the wound on his neck, striving to stem the flow of blood. "Chu Lin, Chu Lin." There were myriad words I longed to express. Yet in that moment, I found myself at a loss, fighting back tears as I repeatedly called his name, my voice quivering uncontrollably. "Are you insane? Don't you fear death?" Chu Lin was unable to respond. He rested his chin on my shoulder, letting out a soft, painful laugh that sounded akin to a wheezing bellows. Blood continued to pour from his wound, an unrelenting torrent. The pungent scent of blood filled the room. With his last ounce of strength, Chu Lin wrapped his arms around my waist before losing consciousness. His limp body swayed dangerously, and I instinctively caught him. "Chu Lin, don't die." I heard the desperate plea in my voice laced with tears. Chu Lin was rushed into the operating room for emergency treatment. Numbly, I returned to the hospital room, entered the bathroom, and stood before the mirror, gazing at my reflection. At that moment, my face and lips were a ghostly white, my body smeared with blood, a stark contrast to the confident air of the Tsin family I usually presented to the world. Everything had spiraled out of control. Perhaps it could be said that from the moment I fell in love with Chu Lin, all had already begun to unravel. Yet, I naively believed that I could maintain my composure, elegantly extricating myself from this marriage. Had I not indulged Chu Lin on that fateful birthday night, I would not have become pregnant, ensnaring myself in this predicament. Had I not been so presumptuous in my understanding of Chu Lin, uttering those careless words, he would not have harmed himself, teetering on the brink of death. Chu Lin accused me of arrogance, and he was not entirely wrong. Standing under the shower, I meticulously washed away the dried blood from my skin, donned a fresh set of clothes, and returned to sit quietly on a bench outside the operating room, awaiting news. I lost track of time until Cheng Zhen appeared. He approached cautiously, then knelt before me, sobbing. "It's all my fault, Mr. Cien. I never anticipated things would escalate to this extent. In truth, you and Mr. Chu were never mismatched. It was I, consumed by jealousy, who deliberately swapped your pheromone sample with an ineffective one. I merely wished for you to divorce him. I never imagined Mr. Chu would resort to self-destruction. No wonder I was pregnant. The obstacles Chu Lin believed to exist had never been present at all. I had placed too much trust in this subordinate who had followed me for years, forgetting that love could breed selfishness. I'm tired." I shut my eyes, unwilling to look at him. "Submit your resignation on your own." After several hours of intensive care, Chu Lin's life was preserved, but his glands had irrevocably deteriorated. He was no longer an alpha. This was his method of escaping the shackles of instinct. Since he had indeed succeeded, I too would honor my words. On the third day of his hospitalization, Chu Lin finally emerged from his coma. I arranged for a bed to be added to the VIP room, and he lay in the adjacent bed. I had Su Sijuan withdraw the lawsuit. "Really?" Chu Lin's eyes fluttered open upon hearing this, and he attempted to sit up in excitement, but the thick bandages around his neck rendered him immobile. Even turning his head to look at me was impossible. It seemed he had momentarily forgotten his pain, incessantly seeking confirmation. We're not getting divorced? Really? I reluctantly replied with a soft yes. The next question came swiftly. Tsunyueshi, you've actually liked me all along. Haven't you? I felt a flicker of annoyance and snapped my laptop shut. Chu Lin, don't you think there are many things you should explain to me before asking such questions? Chu Lin awkwardly uttered an "oh." This was the first time we were facing each other with such honesty. Chu Lin stared at the ceiling, rambling about his innermost feelings. Tsunyueshi, I've liked you since the very first time I met you. I just didn't realize it back then and was resistant to marriage because I was unhappy with my parents' arrangements. Since marrying you, I've been plagued by fear. Tsunyueshi, you are adored by so many, like a moon surrounded by stars. You have your ever-supportive childhood friend, your loyal assistant, and even omegas like Chiyong are drawn to you. I fear that I might inadvertently lose you. I turned to look at Chu Lin in surprise. I had never expected him to feel jealousy over omegas. It turned out that the day he intercepted the gift Chiyong had intended for me was not merely out of concern for my feelings, but out of jealousy. I admit I was overly hostile towards Su Sijuan, but what could I do? He is your childhood friend. Who else could I be jealous of? Moreover, that brat is indeed despicable. How dare he take you away right under my nose? I won't forgive him. As Chu Lin spoke, he pounded the bed in frustration, only to inadvertently aggravate his neck wound, causing him to cry out in pain. I cautioned him, be careful. I don't want blood splattered all over the room again. After a moment, Chu Lin continued, I'm sorry about Chiyong. I truly hadn't anticipated that the allure of a perfectly matched pheromone would be so potent. Had I known, I wouldn't have taken him on. I could have found a friend to help sponsor instead. That night at the party, I almost lost control. It took a slap to my own face to regain my senses. After realizing you were missing, I rushed to find you, and after administering the suppressant to Chiyong, I had him sent back to school. I've instructed him not to return to the company and arranged for another sponsor. From now on, I will have no further connection with him, and we will not meet again. Now, I am no longer affected by pheromones. Tsunyueshi, I will not cause you any more distress. Can you trust me once more? I sighed softly. Fine. Chu Lin exhaled in relief, then circled back to his earlier question. Now, can you answer me? Tsunyueshi, have you fallen for me? I lowered my gaze, replying softly, if it were someone I didn't like, going mad and stabbing me in the neck, how could I ever acquiesce? Upon hearing this, Chu Lin chuckled. What a convoluted response. But it's certainly your style. No sooner had he finished speaking than a nurse entered, pulling back the door. Mr. Tsin, it's time. Chu Lin immediately tensed. What time? Are you going for an abortion? I shot him an exasperated glance. I'm going for a prenatal checkup. Behave yourself and don't move around. Ultimately, Chu Lin chose to accommodate my work arrangements and settled abroad with me. With a disrupted routine, he began to adhere to a 9-to-5 schedule, accompanying me every evening. We were no longer mere strangers in a marriage. 7 months later, our child was born. A little omega boy. Throughout the pregnancy, I was engrossed in work up until the very last moment before entering the delivery room, which alarmed Chu Lin. Post-delivery, he insisted I take time to recuperate properly. Thus, I remained at home for half a year, watching our son grow from a wrinkled infant into a crawling baby. Now he has finally uttered mama, albeit unconsciously. Chu Lin was even more thrilled than I was, lifting the child high into the air. All right, go put him to sleep. I watched this father-son duo with a mix of exasperation and affection. After Chu Lin had lulled the baby to sleep, he quietly settled beside me, gently nudging me with his arm. My dear, this moment belongs solely to us. I comprehended his intent, yet my work remained unfinished, so I merely brushed my lips against his in a perfunctory manner. However, Chu Lin was relentless. He leaned in closer, pressing me down onto the sofa. The night is still young. A mere kiss is far from sufficient. And thus concludes the tale. Thank you for listening, and until we meet again for the next story.